Hello and welcome back to History Edulearn. Today we are going to start with a new lesson, the French Revolution. French Revolution is said to be the most important event in the world history since it has given the world the principles like liberty, equality and fraternity. This event had taken place on 14 July 1789. Somewhat 7,000 people from the city of Paris attacked the prison of Bastille. This Bastille was the symbol of absolute monarchy, and all these people attacked and taken remains and sold it in the market as a souvenir. So we are going to see and discuss in this chapter, the first chapter from 9th standard, about the French Revolution and what had led to the revolution and why people actually revolted. Before understanding why there was a people's revolution in France, first let us understand what is the meaning of revolution. Revolution means fundamental and long-lasting change. That time, Bourbon dynasty was ruling in France, and they were ruled under divine right theory, meaning the monarchs were the supreme and they were the representatives of God on the earth. Louis XVI became monarch in the year 1774. He married at the age of 20 to Austrian princess Marie Antoinette. He inherited empty treasury. Now, what were the reasons for empty treasury? Let's see. France was engaged in long years war that had drained her financial resources. Second reason, the cost of maintaining extravagant palace at Versailles. Third reason, France helped 13 American colonies to gain freedom from Britain. This had drawn France into huge debt. They took a loan at the rate of interest of 10%, which was too high. Same time, government had to spend maximum amount on the debt. The maintenance cost of army, payments of civil servants, officers and universities. They had a debt of 20 livres approximately. The state was forced thus to increase the taxes. And when the taxes were increased in order to fill their empty treasury, the common masses were dissatisfied with the government and they went against the government. How was the French society in the late 18th century? It was divided into three estates. Estates meaning classes. The first estate consisted of the clergies, that means the church. The second estate consisted of nobility, nobles and feudal lords. And the third estate of the commoners, big business person, merchants, officers, lawyers, teachers, doctors, peasants, small farmer, laborers, etc. comprise in this estate. The first two estates were also called privileged class because they were exempted from the payment of taxes and they were ruled under divine right theory. They enjoyed feudal services from the members of third estate. The members of third estate used to work in their houses, fields and serve in army and also build roads. The first two estates were privileged class in France. So what was the condition of third estate? The condition of third estate was very worst. Why? Because they were heavily burdened with taxes. And what taxes? Tithe, tally, feudal tax, indirect tax. Tithe was a tax paid 1/10 of the total production to the church. Tally, this tax was directly paid to the government. Feudal tax was paid to the feudal lords. And indirect taxes were also paid on salt and other required daily commodities like tobacco. During same time, there was an increase in population of the country. France whose population in the year 1715 was 23 million, they witnessed a rise in population in 1789 with 28 million. The basic commodities or the basic food like bread, its prices also increased rapidly. Workers in France were paid very low wages. So there was a discontent among the workers. There was a discontent among the common masses because the prices of the necessary goods had increased. And same time, the gap between the rich and poor had widened. During that time, whenever there was a drought or a hail, reduced the harvest, but they were not exempted from payment of taxes. So this was what very sad situation in France. The first two states who were only 4%, their population was only 4%, but they enjoyed 96% of resources, while the third state whose population was 96%, they were having access to only 4% of resources. That's why there was social inequality. Social inequality led to subsistence crisis, meaning an extreme situation where the basic means of livelihood are endangered. Thus, discontent against the monarchs and the first two states increased in France. The educated class felt the need of social justice and improve the social, political, economic, cultural conditions in France. The middle class was consisted of the big businessmen, merchants, officers, lawyers, teachers, doctors, etc. This was being the educated class, they decided to fight against the feudal lords, monarchs, and the system in France. Rousseau was important because he wrote a social contract theory. And in this theory, he emphasized on equal voting right and democratic government. There was another thinker and a philosopher called Voltaire. He was famous for critical writing, satirical writings. Then there was another philosopher and a thinker called Montesquieu. He gave separation of power. The legislative, executive, and judiciary powers, which were earlier exercised by the monarchs alone. Montesquieu demanded the separation of power of legislature, executive, and judiciary. There was another thinker called John Locke. He refused the divine rights of king who considered themselves as divine, supreme representative of the God on the earth, and they had full right to rule the common masses, which was wrong. John Locke, he refused this divine right of king. These revolutionary ideas were liked, discussed, and publicly spread. Same time, people inspired from American War of Independence of 1776. Thus, there was awakening in the minds of common masses. Common masses started mobilizing and coming together, and this led to the French Revolution. There was tremendous discontent in the minds of third state against the first two states, and they demanded the revival of tax system in France. Since the State General meeting was convened. What is a State General? It is political body of three state representatives, and this meeting of all the three representatives was summoned after a lapse of 175 years. Last time it was conveyed in the year 1614, and now after a lapse of 175 years this meeting was called again. Why? In order to pass a proposal of new taxes. Traditionally, each state had single vote, but this time, educated class of third state demanded voting by the assembly, meaning one person, one vote. Demand was not fulfilled, and thus enraged masses of third state walk out of the assembly hall and met at tennis court. They declared themselves as National Assembly and took oath declaring they were the true representatives of the people. They did not to follow the monarchs or the first two estates, and they themselves were the true representatives henceforth. They also demanded writing of national constitution, because constitution, which is a book of rules, laws, is must for any country, and with the help of these rules, norms, any country can expect the progress, welfare, since this National Assembly demanded national constitution. The awakened masses of third estate now decided to break the chains of inequality, injustice, and hereditary slavery. Thus, on 14 July 1789, there was outbreak of revolution in France. The prices of bread were increased. The bakers exploited the situation and they hoarded the supplies. They hoarded the stocks. When women and others who were standing in front of bakery shop and they were not getting the bread, which was the important basic food for the common masses. That time, in one instance, a group of angry women, they stormed on shops. Thus, the situation in city Paris went out of control. Thus, king ordered troops to enter into Paris. This agitated crowd, same time, stormed and destroyed the prison of Bastille. On the other side, peasants, farmers, and other common masses of third estate, they attacked and looted, hoarded grains. They burned the records from the different government offices. This was a great threat and a fear to the noble class. And what nobles did? They fled and migrated into the neighboring countries. Louis XVI was forced to resign through this revolution, and he accepted the supremacy of the constitution. Thus, the third estate also abolished land owned by the church. After king's resignation, France became constitutional monarch. They completed the draft of constitution of National Assembly in 1791. Its main objective was to limit the powers of monarchs. They also demanded separation of powers, that is, legislative, executive, and judiciary powers should be separated. This is called Declaration of Rights of Citizen. Each individual citizen of France declared this as a right of citizen. Accordingly, first, men are born free and have equal rights. They are free to form any political organization. Nation is sovereign. Liberty, equality, and fraternity is one of the principles of this constitution, and freedom of press. So these were the highlighting features of Declaration of Rights of Citizen. On 21st May 1792, France abolished monarchy and declared as a republic. Marseillaise became the national anthem. Like we have Jana Gana Mana as a national anthem of India, that Marseillaise also became important song at the time of revolution. Everybody was singing this song in France. Adopted number of national symbols of free France. Example, broken chain, bundle of rods, a eye in a triangle radiating light, blue, white, red as their national colors, etc. Now, after France becoming republic, Maximilian Robespierre formed Jacobins Club on the principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity. King Louis XVI and Queen Marie Antoinette were executed publicly on 21st Jan 1793. This brought all French people together. The principles of Jacobins Club were very much liked by one of the princely state in India, Mysore. Tipu Sultan, who was the ruler of Mysore, was member of Jacobins Club. Even in the 19th century, Raja Ram Mohan Roy was influenced by its ideology. Many women actively participated in this movement. Voting right for men was brought to 21 from 25 years. Over the period of time, there was change in the mindset of Robespierre. He followed a policy of severe control and punishment. He arrested an guillotine who did not follow his methods. Guillotine was a device which was designed by Dr. Guillotine. So under this guillotine, the people who were going against the principles of republic government, they were ruthlessly beheaded. He also controlled the wages, food prices, and laid restrictions on the speeches and press. The churches were shut down. Thus, he was becoming more dictator type, since people demanded moderation. And he was later on arrested by the people, and on July 1794, he was guillotined. Thus, this was the fall of Jacobins government. After the fall of Jacobins government, middle class in France established directory rule. Actually, there was no unanimity in decision among the members of directory. That's why this government was a failure. Napoleon Bonaparte took this as an opportunity and declared himself Emperor of France in 1804. Let's see the period between 1794 to 1804. Women and slaves who asked and demanded for improvement of their living conditions. French woman activist Olympe de Gauche fought for women's right. During this time, women were not given equal wages along with the men, and they demanded for equal wages. The voting right, the suffrage right, was denied to the women. So they also demanded this voting right, and they got this right in the year 1946. This movement for suffrage continued for 200 years. So it was a long struggle for suffrage right. During this time, girls' schooling was made compulsory. Divorce was made legal. Fathers could no longer force girls into marriage against their will. They also got an opportunity to start their own business. During the Jacobins regime, women's club and their political participation was banned. During the reign of terror, many prominent women leaders were also arrested. Slaves who were brought from Africa by the Europeans and sold in American continent. Slaves lived in a miserable condition, and slaves or the slavery was banned when directory rule in France was not able to solve the problems of common masses. That time, Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself as an emperor in 1804. He was ambitious and set out to conquer neighboring European countries. He was always looked as a modernizer of Europe because he introduced some laws, that is, one, protection of private property and uniform system of weights and measures. His army always viewed as invading force. At last, he was defeated by Britain in Battle of Waterloo in the year 1815. That's all about the French Revolution. We studied about how the revolution had taken place, what were the factors that led to the revolution, and how the social inequality was replaced by freedom and equality. How the French Revolution gave the world the three principles of liberty, equality, and fraternity. So that is all about our lesson, the French Revolution. Thank you.